My name is Borsch. I am originally trained as a social scientist, also later on trained as a climate scientist. I joined XR in March 2019, have been giving this talk since September 2019, and have been one of the editors of the talk since January 2020, so quite some time. If you don't like or disagree with some of the things that appear in this talk, I'm one of the people you can speak to about that. And an important point to make about the talk generally is that it is all scientifically referenced, and everything we say here is based in mainstream science and fact. Now, going to the next page, as a preamble, I'd like to say a few words about what's going on around us. We have entered the age of consequences, and we no longer have the option for a non-radical future. So we have some options of what kind of radical we would like that future to look like, but we really do need to take control of that future. Right now, on this current trajectory, with business as usual, it is looking radically bad, radically horrific. But we can strive for a better future, which is radically fair for the whole world, not just for ourselves and our families and our friends and our neighborhoods, but also for the global community of humans, as well as other living creatures around the planet today and the generations that are still to come. This work has already started by Extinction Rebellion, and today we're here to invite you to either join that work if you haven't already done so, or to continue and accelerate that work. The talk itself started out life as a science educational talk. Over time, it has evolved into much more about politics, much more about the theory of change, and more of a recruitment and engagement talk for those joining Extinction Rebellion or those that are thinking about doing so. And I would love to see, I don't think we can do that now with the way the recording is going, but I would love to see, perhaps we can put it in the chat. I'd like to know the composition of the people in the room. If you can just put a little note in the chat, whether you're new to XR, a more seasoned XR activist, or just considering XR, or not at all considering, just joining to see what we're all about. And I'd love to have a quick look at that as we go through. But in the meantime, we're going to look at three aspects in this talk. Number one, we'll talk about the science of climate change and the ecological emergency. We'll stop at the end of that. Number two, we want to look at theory of change and what's gone wrong. Why are we in the place where we are? And lastly, we want to talk about what we can do about it, and how Extinction Rebellion, or XR, comes into the picture there. I will use XR with Extinction Rebellion interchangeably. Thank you. I can see the responses, the reactions rolling in, a mix of not so new and seasoned. It's great to see all of you here. It's good to know a bit of a mix. Just considering is exciting as well. And just so everybody's in the spirit of transparency, my dad is in the audience too tonight, so I'm extra excited about that. Let's talk for just one moment about what Extinction Rebellion is, who we are. It'll be just one slide, and then we go straight into the science. But it's important to make a little statement of fact: who we are not. We'll talk about XR a lot more later on. So pretty much every word on this page is extremely important. We are a non-violent, direct action, civil disobedience movement. We're not a charity, we're not a company, we're a movement. There's no legal entity called Extinction Rebellion. It's a bunch of people who subscribe to the same set of values, and we are based in science and facts, and we are recognizing that there is a climate and ecological emergency. We're looking for a solution, and we have also discovered, it wasn't rocket science, that individual action is not going to be sufficient to tackle these crises. And therefore, our goal is to make our governments and corporations take action on our behalf, both here in the UK at home, but but also internationally, because much of what we do is going to be fairly pointless if these organizations, corporations, and governments don't take action that they must do to take action to protect us, particularly as governments have pledged when they come to power. So that is Extinction Rebellion in a very brief nutshell. Now, moving on to this slide here, it's about emotions, because as we go through the slide deck here today, you will be experiencing some emotions. I know I feel them too every time I give this talk. And it really varies by individual, what kind of emotion they get to feel. Some people feel shock, some people feel denial, or grief, numbness. My personal feeling has been anger. I'm just very angry because there's a lot that we could be doing and a lot that we should be stopping doing, which is so obvious. And yet it's not happening. I've recently read an article, a scientific article, which points in the direction that anger is one of the most likely emotions that will lead to action. So I was curious to see that. I don't know how many people in this room feel angry, but if you do, use your anger because it leads to action. When we talk about the planet, we talk about it in the sense that there isn't another one. There is no planet B. You might have seen a placard like that. Well, there isn't one. This planet is our one and only life support system. It's got everything we need. And it is still quite habitable today. So anybody who tells you that we're going to go and colonize the moon, yes, we've landed on the moon today. India have, and that's brilliant stuff. But we're not going to be living on the moon or Mars or anywhere else. And if we destroy this planet, which is sustaining life right now, then there will be nowhere else for us to go. And yet, that is exactly what we're doing. We are facing these two crises. There are more crises, and they all deserve a talk of their own. So if you want to talk about particulate pollution, there's a talk for that. If you want to talk about ocean acidification, there's definitely merit in that. If you want to talk about plastic pollution, all of these things are very important, but the climate and ecological crises are the two, and they're both very interlinked crises, that if we don't solve these, then everything else is not going to matter. We are destroying our climate, the stable patterns of weather that we've experienced over time, our ability to grow crops, our ability to live on this planet. And this is an existential and an emerging current crisis. And without radical change, and I'll talk about what radical change means, without radical change now, the system that we're very much used to and which sustains humanity as a whole is facing collapse in the very near term. We have come to the very edge of what the Earth can support. We are overusing the Earth unsustainably, and we're abusing it, and it's going to lead to disaster if we carry on like this. Now, the next slide I'd like to show you is what's called the hockey stick graph. I'll show you the back end of the hockey stick in a minute. This is the only slide with squiggly lines on it. I promise not too much of this kind of stuff coming up. However, this is a really important one. And this talks about the carbon dioxide, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere over the past couple of thousand years. And as you can see on this line, it's not even squiggly that much because it's quite flat. It's flat at about 280 parts per million, with a little wobble here in the 1600s when it went down to 270. Which actually caused a mini ice age in Europe with massive starvation, famine, and death. So that's how sensitive climate is to CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And you can see how flat and level it's been. And this has given us the clement and benevolent and stable climate, which has enabled the global north to develop into the societies that we see today. Now, with the advent of the industrial age, we started burning fossil fuels, first coal and then oil and gas. And these fossil fuels have put CO2 in the atmosphere in vast and exponentially increasing amounts, to the point that we are now at about 420, 425 parts per million, which doesn't sound like much, but it is actually a lot more than we used to have. And the safe level is we're told it's about 350 parts per million. We're well above the safe levels now. And the properly squiggly lines that you see on the right-hand side of the chart in blue, these are actual temperature measurements. So we have temperature reconstructions for millions of years going back, but these are actual measurements. And the measurements globally started around about 1850, and they get much more accurate and much more detailed over time. And you can see how closely they track with the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. The higher the concentration of CO2, the higher the temperatures. We're at about 1.2 degrees on average. And just as a reminder, this is an average temperature. It tends to be much higher over land, much higher in the Arctic and Antarctic. For example, Europe is an interesting example. We have 2.2 degrees of warming already in continental Europe right now. We've tried everything. We've tried to rule out all the other factors, whether to see if really is it really CO2 and the other greenhouse gases that are causing the temperatures to rise in this way. And we've comprehensively ruled out all the other things, so we can rest safely in the knowledge that this is truly what's happening. And it's called the hockey stick because of that exponential end bit here, which was the term. The study was done by Dr. Michael Mann and his friends in Philadelphia a couple of decades ago now, and there have been a lot of discussion and books written about whether or not these facts are true, but they turn out to be true. And we talk about climate change that's into the future. It's not into the future. Climate change is now. We know it's 1.1, 1.2. The science isn't exactly clear on where we are, but we're very close to the guardrail of 1.5 degrees, which the Paris Agreement of 2015 has said we shouldn't really go over, or we should keep it well below 2 degrees. Well, we're very close to that now. And I wish I could tell you that these images are out of some dystopian science fiction movie, but these images are what the planet can and does look like today. And with climate scientists, we talk about chaotic water regimes, which means too much water, not enough water, and often very close to each other. For example, last year we had a massive mega drought in Australia, followed by massive floods. But it's basically the lack of water, droughts and wildfires, and too much water, sea level rise, and floods. So those are what we're looking at already today. And last year, Antonio Guterres, our granddad, the UN Secretary General, have said, he says very quotable stuff. He said, unchecked carbon pollution is forcing the world's most vulnerable on a frog march to destruction now. So 1.1 might seem like not too much, but actually it's the climate crisis. It's here with us. And if anybody cares to look out your window and see what kind of temperatures we're experiencing this year and this summer, you know that what I'm talking about is not nonsense. The extra warming is just incredible. So if you imagine how much this, and this is just the extra warming. So there's the baseline warming at the pre-industrial age heat, which was landing on the planet. And on top of that, the extra warming today is the energy equivalent of 5 Hiroshima nuclear bombs being detonated every single second, day and night, every day for the entire year until into perpetuity. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 10 atomic bombs have exploded on the first surface of the planet in terms of the extra heating that we're experiencing today. And this is true everywhere around the globe to varying degrees, but not just on distant shores. It is also very specific to the UK. You know, we are experiencing a lot of flooding and a lot of wildfires in the UK itself. And if you look at the top right-hand corner where this house has been flooded, you can imagine the dim view that an insurance company might take if the house floods every single year. There is a village called Fairborn in South Wales. If you're familiar with this, it's a very interesting story, heartbreaking story, where it was built below sea level, and it's being protected by sea defenses at the moment. But those defenses are not going to be there around forever and won't be sufficient. So the village of Fairborn is going to have to be decommissioned in the next 20 years or so. And that being said, you can imagine property prices in Fairborn right now. People are stranded there. They are unable to sell their houses. They don't need to leave just yet, but you could call them our first climate refugees. And there's another couple of million people in the UK alone who are at the same sort of risk in the next 30 years. And that's along coasts as well as along rivers, which are liable to flooding. And we also see the wildfires. Wildfire seasons are out of control in the UK. So a wildfire season over the course of a whole year is now compressed into the first 4 months of a year. That's how many wildfires are raging, even in the UK. We don't hear as much about it. We don't hear about it as much as we do about, I don't know, Greece and Canada or Siberia or Australia, all these big fires, but it does also happen here. And that is all I wanted to say about climate. I want to just go into the ecological crisis for very brief, just a couple of slides. And nature. We talk a lot about nature as something that's wonderful and beautiful and something to be experienced by our children, but actually it is critically important for us for survival purposes as well. It is what makes the planet habitable for us as humans and everybody else, of course. And yet we're experiencing this dangerous and unprecedented decline due to the way that we produce our food, and mostly it's animal agriculture. There's about 1 million species of plants and animals which are threatened with extinction right now. This is, I would personally prefer to call it an extermination event, not an extinction event, because we are doing it and we're knowingly doing it. The world has lost a third of its forests in the last 10,000 years. And forests are not a nice to have. We absolutely need those forests. And in fact, we need to re-wild nature. And people often ask about, well, what's the solution? How do we get rid of CO2 in the atmosphere? And the one and only real technology out there for getting rid of, scrubbing the planet's atmosphere of CO2 is the tree. If we had 1 trillion more trees, we'd be in a much better place. Of course, trees take time, but still, instead of putting more trees on the planet, we're continuously cutting more trees down. And it's great news from Brazil this year that deforestation has dropped by 60% in the Amazon rainforest, with the Bolsonaro regime happily out of the picture. And we can see that change does happen when the political will is there. It is so clearly not inevitable that trees need to be cut. We're also at the same time degrading the soil. As soon as you get rid of a forest, a lush forest like we see on the left-hand side, and it turns into something like that on the right-hand side, we're creating desertification, land degradation, and drought, because this land is unable to hold moisture. And in fact, the world has failed to meet a single target in stopping the destruction of biodiversity. What we're doing is changing the face of the planet from this green thing into this. This is what animal agriculture looks like. And of course, these poor cattle, they need to eat something, and they won't be finding that anywhere near here. So in fact, 80% of all the agricultural land is turned into animal agriculture, both for grazing animals, but also to create the food crops for these animals. And we only get about 20% of our calories from the animal derived products. And so it's Pareto's principle all over again. 20% of the land provides 80% of our calories in fruit and vegetables, and 80% of the land provides 20% of our calories in animal-derived products. It is crazy, and it's also changeable. Now, I want to talk briefly about what happens next. We've talked about the Paris Agreement of 2015, 1.5 degrees being the safe upper limit, and of course 1.1, 1.2, as we see today, is already causing us problems. We are very likely to reach 1.5 in the next few years, perhaps for a brief period of time, but then completely. And in fact, there are now no credible scenarios where we don't crash right through the 1.5 barrier. There's a lot of climate modeling going on, where climate scientists are trying to figure out, if we do this, what happens then? If we don't do this, or how many of these, I don't know, dams and wind farms and solar farms we build, what does that do to the climate? And there's not one single scenario where we stay below 1.5. In fact, scenarios put us across 2.0, to which, again, Antonio Guterres says we are on a fast track to climate disaster. So in the next 20 years, we need to prepare for more extreme heat, more extreme than what we experience today, more flooding, more wildfires, more storms, more severe storms, poorer crop yields and crop failures, also lower fish stocks, and it will lead to more hunger and displacement of millions of people. My degree is in climate migration, so speak to me about that separately if you like. I can talk about that all day. Displacement of people is going to be a huge problem. And also think about this, we are probably the last generation who can see the Amazon rainforest, which is expected to crash and turn into savanna and then later on to desert. And we're also going to be the last generation who can see summer sea ice on the Arctic Ocean up north. We could go as high as 2.0 Celsius above pre-industrial average by as early as 2034. And that, my dear ladies and gentlemen, is the final frontier for climate catastrophe. 2 degrees is the must not cross line, and we could be as little as 9 years away from that. So bearing that in mind, what happens later? Let's stop and think a little bit about 2040. That's not such a distant, that's 17 years away, isn't that right? It's 17 years away. Most of us will still be around, and certainly our young people, our loved ones, will be around. As things stand, at that time, we will have more than 2 degrees of heating. Large parts of the world will be uninhabitable because of extreme heat and drought and floods. And more of the tipping points will be reached. And the problem with tipping points is that you cannot go back. Once you've changed the state, for example, of the Amazon rainforest, if it changes to savanna, it won't change back into rainforest just by planting trees or just by sucking out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, should we be able to do that. And these impacts reinforce each other and make everything worse. It speeds the scale of warming and the scale of heat in the atmosphere up. It's an exponential process. Above 2 degrees, we are threatened with a game over for civilized society as we know it. And that's why people in Paris in 2015 set that as the absolute maximum. Our leaders know that this 2 degrees of warming will cause hunger and migration and resource wars. And yet they continue on the trajectory as before. So history doesn't end in the year 2100, but all the projections do. So, which I don't understand, because even ourselves and perhaps our children will certainly expect to be alive at that point. And by 2100, the modeling says that we could be up to 3 or 4 degrees warmer than pre-industrial average, which is incompatible with organized society as we know it. The majority of the Earth's population will be exposed to deadly heat every year, catastrophic crop failures every year, water shortage for up to 1/3 of people every year, and hundreds of millions of people exposed to flooding every year. And nature will be challenged beyond capacity to adapt, will lead to catastrophic mass extinctions around the globe. It is not conceivable that humanity can adapt to this level of, it's not just about the heat, it's everything else that's happening around it. And at that point in time, any chance for a better future for most of humanity will have been lost forever. And at this point is the moment I'd like to stop. I will take a moment for everybody to just take a couple of deep breaths. And I would like to invite anyone with a thought, a comment, or a feeling to pop that into the chat. How are you doing? If anyone would like to say words, you're welcome to do that too.
I'm always interested in tipping points. I'm always surprised that they seem to be so far in the future. Personally, I reckon they're closer than we ever want to consider.
There are good, robust, reliable studies that say we may have already breached some of those tipping points. We just haven't noticed them yet. For instance, the collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet, perhaps the Amazon rainforest, which is now a net carbon source, not a carbon sink. And so, and also the Arctic sea ice tipping point, also permafrost tipping point. I think there's 7 or 8 of these major ones. And people are coming in with some feelings which I'd like to read out: devastating, angry, frustrated, incredibly sad, shocked, sickened, overwhelmed. And we must change the system now before it's too late. And especially for the grandchildren, despair and overwhelmed. Now look, it is the case that this talk is engineered to bring out those feelings at this point in time from the audience. Just a new comment which says, detached from the reality we face. That is so true. It's so hard to believe that when we look out the window and everything looks all right, that it's somehow not all right, or it's going to be not all right in very short order. But so, as I was saying, the talk is created in a way that it takes you down this rabbit hole into this dark place by this point in time. But the next bits are hopefully going to make you even more angry. And then also provide you with a little bit of hope and a route to action. Anger motivates to action, and baffled that in 30 years the situation hasn't been heeded by people in power. I'm just reading through the chats. We live in interesting times, and the point that you make, Chris, about the situation isn't heeded by people in power, we will be talking about that in just a second. What are the routes to action? Ask Simon. We will be talking about that too. And if that's all for now, I'm very happy to crack on, unless somebody would like to. A pertinent question. When do we all die? The $1 million question. On this talk, I'm not going to comment on that. I have my personal private view on that, but I'm not going to burden the people on here with that view. Are people ready for GDP degrowth? Says Barbara, and she is disappointed that Exile are not recognizing that our human rights combined with growth economics to favor humans over every other life form. Degrowth and well-being economy movement are full of inspiration for social change. I personally think that Extinction Rebellion is very much in favor of no growth or degrowth. And we're about to look at a slide on exactly that, not in exactly those words, but the sentiment certainly for me is very strong. Let's go on, shall we? Shall we move on? Lisa, what do you think? Yeah, okay. Well, what we know is it's all shocking, it's mind-numbing, it's unbelievable, and it's incredible. And the truth of the matter is that nothing has worked so far. Why do I say that? Because we have done a lot of things already. And if you remember the hockey stick graph, which I've shown you earlier, which looked like that, you can plot some of the things that have happened in the past onto that graph. So, for example, the activist group Greenpeace has been founded over 50 years ago. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was formed in 1988, the Rio Earth Summit, the Kyoto Protocol, 1997, the UK Climate Change Act of 2008, and then Copenhagen Accords 2009, Paris Agreement 2015, and COP26, COP27, this year COP28, hosted by an oil sheikh, no less. How interesting. Well, we've done all these things. We have also had a lot of global action locally in various different countries, legal action, and we are currently going through legal action as well. About 1,000 different lawsuits in 28 different countries. We've had all the wind farms and solar farms that we can see as we drive around the country. We've taken our own personal commitments. I'm sure everybody in this room have changed your behaviors. And tons of different environmental campaign groups, such as Greenpeace, but also, Friends of the Earth. Sierra Club is over 100 years old. Have been sounding the alarm for many, many years. And yet, CO2 continues. No, I'm sorry, Benita, I didn't mean to say wind farms are a threat. What I'm saying is, here's I'm trying to list all the different things that we have done to stop CO2 from rising further. And wind farms are part of that solution. And yet, we see the exponential rise of CO2. So when anybody says that we're making progress, look at this diagram. If this red line continues to go up, then no matter how many things we're doing, we're not actually making progress. The red line needs to be completely flat for net zero. It doesn't just need to tail off, it needs to go flat, and ideally it needs to go down because we need to get back to 350. And we're nowhere near going down because we're still going exponentially up, in spite of everything that we're doing. I saw an interesting chart the other day where it showed that renewable energy is going to become the biggest source of energy in globally within the next 3 years. The problem with that chart is that all the other forms of energy are not dropping. We're just using more energy, and more of that is renewables, but we're not using less fossil fuel derived energy. And John has a comment. I'm not going to comment on the comments now. We'll come back to these at the end. The temptation is great to go into the comments, but I'll try not to. So all the things we've tried led to this. We are not making progress. And the funny thing is, or the ironic thing is, that everybody knows this. In 2023, it is so mainstream, and it's such a scientific consensus that climate change is real. There's a climate emergency. Nobody's denying it. Even the deniers are not denying it now. They're delaying it, but they're not denying it. So it's mainstream, but demanding immediate and deep change, as Extinction Rebellion does, is still controversial for some reason. It should be completely uncontroversial. My favorite, look, politicians, they've known for many years. They've known for at least 40 years. The military, they talk about a national security threat, so they know about it too. The scientists have been banging on about this for at least 50 years, and in fact, the greenhouse effect has been known for well over 170 years now. Oil companies, we know now that they have known for many years. And my favorite people, the insurance companies, they have a whole separate risk management department whose job it is to know about these kinds of risks. And if you observe the behavior of insurance companies, you can tell where climate change is really biting. For example, in Northern California, where they refuse to insure new build houses now because of all the wildfires and the risks that poses to insurance companies. So follow the money, and you'll find that they know. And yet we're continuing with business as usual. This is a little image of that I like to show. It's some of our favorite characters, Boris and Joe. They showed up in COP26. They were inside the building. I was outside the building. And they made some very positive noises. And then they went home, and they continued to hand out more drilling licenses than ever. Rishi is no different. He's handing out tons of fossil fuel licenses and wants to drill as much as possible. And the official line, the UK government official line, is to exploit and explore all viable oil and gas sources in the North Sea until death do us part. So governments are not planning radical reductions. In fact, they're planning for 16% more emissions by 2030 than what we had back in 2021 at COP26. And we are throwing good money after bad. We continue to subsidize the fossil fuel industry. And there's a new study out just today in The Guardian. Apparently, the G20 have given 1.1 trillion pounds of subsidies to fossil fuel companies in the last year alone. That's your money and my money. That's taxpayer money being given to fossil fuel companies so that they can do more destruction on the planet. And that amount of money. It's impossible to even gauge what's a trillion, $1.1 trillion, but or pounds. But every single minute we give these companies 10 million pounds of our money. So by the time I finish this sentence, we've given them £1 million to make more destruction. And so it really is the fact that we need to stop these. There's those subsidies, those monies could go into much better places. Now, there's a few slides in this slideshow which I would like you to remember, and a few, just a few that are really important. If you take away nothing else, I'd like you to remember this one. You know, pledges are everywhere about keeping 1.5 degrees alive. It is a blatant lie. Anybody who's saying that they're keeping 1.5 degrees alive are lying to you. Do not believe them. Boris Johnson said this, Joe Biden said this, G7 said this, China said this, everybody's talking about this. They will no doubt be talking about it again in COP28 this year in, is it Qatar? Instead, what we're seeing is targets that put us to about 2.4 degrees. Now, there's a lot of talk about net zero by 2050, and net zero by 2050, this is what it means. That's the target. If, you know, they're selling this as a solution, but in fact, you need to remember every time you hear net zero by 2050 as a solution, you need to know that it's actually a disaster, because that solution would put us well beyond the 2 degrees, which we must not cross. And those are the targets. Now, what about the actual policies? Because we know that globally, governments are really poor, have a terrible record of meeting their targets. They're not meeting their targets, so we're currently on track to anywhere between 2.4 and 4 degrees of warming. And if we go on what they've done in the past in terms of their targets, then we can rest assured that this bracket here is where we're heading right now. Business as usual is killing us. Business as usual is not an option. I'd like to bring your attention to a fallacy, which is if everybody did a little bit, that would amount to a lot. And that's unfortunately untrue. If everybody did a little bit, it would add up to a little bit of change, and that will not be sufficient. Everybody needs to do absolutely everything. There is something called the International Energy Agency, which is ironically actually originally been set up in order to advance the interests of the fossil fuel companies, that they have warned that no new fossil fuel infrastructure is compatible with 1.5. And if we need to stop climate change, there must not be any new fossil fuel projects. And much of the known fossil fuel reserves need to stay in the ground. I'd like to imagine what a net zero UK might look like. Thinking, let's say, for example, I'll talk about transport. So every single car, every single lorry, every single diesel train, all the shipping, everything would need to be converted into something else, into either a renewable or a non-journey. I'd like to talk, many people accuse us of saying, well, you just want more electric cars and it's not the solution. It isn't. The most important solution is to travel less and use less transport. And if you have to travel, walk. If you can't walk, take a bike, cycle, or a scooter, whatever. If you can't do that, take a low carbon, affordable means of plentiful public transport, which we ought to have. And only if all of those options are not options, or you need to go beyond that, then maybe use an electric car. And clearly, probably don't fly. And so that's part of net zero. In addition to that, major complete energy transition. So we would need to upgrade our energy grid to because we expect a lot more electricity usage going forward. We would need to switch all of our electricity generation to renewables. Currently, we're about 40% gas, about 0 to 5% coal. So about half of our electricity generation in the UK is still relying on fossil fuels. That needs to change. We need to insulate every single home in the country. We have the worst housing stock in this in Europe from the perspective of insulation. We need to replace every single gas boiler with electric. We need to change heavy industry. We need to change manufacturing. We need to change everything fundamentally. And if that sounds like a wartime scenario, that's exactly what it should sound like. During World War II, we had a war economy and everything changed rapidly, instantaneously. So we stopped producing cars and started producing fighter jets. And that's the kind of change that we require today. None of that is happening. We're tinkering around the edges. Now, in addition to all of that, systemic change, which you'll keep hearing from XR, individual carbon footprints are just another form of greenwash. And put your hand up. I put my hand up if you have an idea of your carbon footprint, or if you've ever done your carbon footprint, or if you tried to reduce your carbon footprint. I know many of you in this room will have done that. And that's great. But it is also a diversion, because our friends who gave us the Deepwater Horizon oil spill here that you see on this picture, BP, in conjunction with the PR giant Ogilvy, they have been propagating this whole idea of the carbon footprint because it diverts attention to the individual. And what we need to remember is there's two sides to this story. One of them is the supply side, and the other one is the demand side. We, the people, the little people here in this room, we are the demand side. We either use fossil fuels, put them in their cars, or put them in our houses, or we don't. However, you can tinker around with the demand side. Even if you reduce the demand side, if the supply side persists, if you keep bringing up fossil fuels from underground, those fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, will get used at some point by someone at some kind of price point. So changing the demand side is not going to work. That has to be changed to the supply side. We need to leave stuff in the ground. And can we expect the people, the companies that manufacture these fossil fuels to leave it in the ground spontaneously or voluntarily? Of course we can't. There's a profit motive, and they won't do it. So the only people who can make them, who can mandate that change, are governments. So our job in order to force these corporations to change their practices is via governments. We need to get a government who will do that job on our behalf. Now, the question might well be raised, how the hell did we get here? And there's a few reasons. I want to show you three. In fact, two, and then the combination of those two. The first one is what they mistakenly call the representative democracy, our electoral system. I don't think it's very representative, but that's there's no consensus around that. But what we can say is that there is a reason why we have democratic institutions, and that we let governments be changed from time to time, 4 years, 5 years. If you want to get elected, you'll find it very difficult to think 10, 20, or 100 years ahead. So as a politician, it is not entirely your fault that you're thinking of a platform which is popular enough that will get you elected. If I stood for office and said, guys, please vote for me, I'm going to make your lives quite uncomfortable for the next 20 years. Am I going to get your vote? Maybe yours in this room, yes. But a lot of people will not vote for that politician. So politicians always promise things that they promise to get better, not worse, and certainly not to meddle with people's quality of life or people's revenues and income. But unfortunately, that is a recipe for disaster, and they just keep on kicking the can down the road until such time that it will not be kickable anymore. The flip side of that is, and someone mentioned degrowth. This is the problem of the desire or the demand for economic growth, and growth valued above absolutely everything. Capitalism, and more precisely, neoliberal capitalism, assumes that this environment that we have here on the planet is an endless source of raw materials which we can just exploit, such as clean water or air or fertile soil or mineral resources. And it is also at the same time an endless sink to dispose of all the waste and pollution that we produce. But of course, it's not limited. It's just that this is the first time in this century that we've actually reached the limits of the planet. So we're now overreaching it. We've never done this before. We have made this assumption that these resources are free forever and that reducing waste has no consequences forever. But we are now using well over one full planet, so it's completely unsustainable and it will lead to collapse. The image that you see here is from the Ogoniland oil spill in the Niger River Delta in Nigeria. This has been caused by Royal Dutch Shell. 11 years ago, they were ordered to do a cleanup. They were ordered to pay $1 billion of damages to the Ogoni people, and they haven't done it. It's still there, and they have gotten away with it. That's what's happening. So they can just completely act with impunity. I'm seeing some of the chat points. Thank you for that point. We'll come back to that later. So we talked about politics being one issue and this demand for growth being the other. And the third point I'd like to make is that there's a combination of those two. So whereas we know from a global study and many local ones as well, that the majority of people want change, want action on climate, global climate justice is being sacrificed for the sake of a tiny little minority. We know that the top 5 fossil fuel giants, just those 5 companies, are spending around $200 million a year just on lobbying to delay carbon reduction. And I want you to put that into the context of, for example, the budget of Extinction Rebellion. We raise about £1 million, £1 million rather, in a typical year. So they outspend us by 2 orders of magnitude times 2, and it's a bit surprising in a way that we're cutting through at all. And of course, the billionaire press barons are on their side as well. So you can see all that agenda spilling out from the press as well. And I'm not one of those people who like to point fingers. I really don't. I don't like that as a general rule, but you have to wonder who's responsible. And it won't be surprising when I tell you that it is people who are in power. And we're not talking about the 1%. We're talking about the 0.01%. So the rest of us, the 99.99% of people, our job is to make sure that power gets much, much more redistributed into wider society in an equitable way, historically equitable way as well. And actually addressing financial global power and justice would almost immediately also address a great deal of the climate emergency as well. Just to show you just how out of kilter this system of injustice is at the moment, I'd like to show you 2 slides that interact with each other. On here, you can see how global emissions historically have been distributed across the planet. And you can see that Europe has a disproportionate part to play in global historical emissions, with the UK, with Britain being a big one there, with early use of coal. And then, of course, also the US. China is coming up the curve. Japan's quite big for its own size. India is still quite small. But what's really striking to see is just how small South Africa and South America are in terms of global historical emissions. And then, if you compare that to the impacts of climate change globally, you can see that it's pretty much the opposite of the previous image. So just to be very clear, those with the most responsibility here, Northern America, Europe, are suffering the least amount of impact, and those with the least amount of responsibility, Africa, Southeast Asia, India, are going to see the greatest impact. And these two charts kind of explain pretty clearly why the US and Europe are so slow on action, because the impacts don't fall on them, even though the cause historically sits squarely on their side. Now, this is the second slide I'd like you to take home with you tonight, and it is about CO2. I call myself somewhat of a CO purist. There's a lot of things to focus on, but if you had to pick one, it would have to be carbon dioxide, because if we do nothing else, we need to stop fossil fuels from being extracted and used. And I'd like to put 3 words into your head. Number 1, we need to do this rapidly. Number 2, entirely. And number 3, forever. Rapidly, entirely, and forever. Everything else is secondary. If we don't do this, we will have failed. It is literally that straightforward. Personal action, lifestyle changes, fantastic. They will fail on their own. It is critical that we force and convince the powerful, the governments, international organizations, and corporations to make the change on our behalf. And that is exactly what Extinction Rebellion is here to do. And make no mistake, it is possible. Net zero, even net negative, is possible. It depends on political will. We have all the tools we need to achieve this. And the way I would put this is, this is a mural by Jane Mutiny. I think it's down on the south coast somewhere. Is it in Hastings or Brighton? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's Jane Mutiny there, sitting with her mural, and it says, "It's not too late. Act now." I would modify that slightly. It is too late to avoid a disaster, but it is not too late to be able to choose what kind of disaster we want. Do we want an unmitigated disaster or a manageable and managed disaster? The option of avoiding a disaster is not on the table anymore. And this, thank you, it's worthing. Thank you very much, Rod. It's a beautiful one. So that's where Extinction Rebellion comes into play. And this is who we are. We stand together. We've been told to go and save the world, and that's a big thing to shoulder, but that's kind of what we're doing. We don't know whether we can succeed, but that would be a really poor reason not to try anyway. We have felt that with everything else that's been tried, we do not have any choice but to rebel. Everything else has failed. XR is not a small organization. It's not UK only. XR lives around the world. We have over 1,000 local groups in 86 different countries. We have over 400 groups in the UK alone. Every town and city in the UK has an Extinction Rebellion chapter. There will be one near you. If you are new to XR or you're considering joining, there will be people within 10 miles of where you live, almost certainly, unless you're a very remote location. How am I doing for time? We're kind of at an hour. I would like to take another 5 minutes or so. Maybe even 10, because I want to talk about a bit about theories of change. And with the break included, that should be okay. We should be fine. What we found with other social movements in the past is the example I like to give is the Occupy movement, which happened in 2010 and thereabouts. Is a very commendable group. Very disappointed with the current state of affairs and business as usual, but couldn't really articulate what they actually wanted. So a social movement that cannot say what it wants cannot get what it wants. And so Extinction Rebellion has 3 very clear, big demands. The first one is to tell the truth. Everybody, all institutions, including media, politicians, and corporations, need to communicate every day how bad trouble we are in. If we had the same level of coverage that we had with COVID, that's the kind of communication that we would need. It's not yet happening. It is getting there, but it isn't happening, and we need more communication and more clarity on the level of danger that we're in. The second demand, which I usually call the impossible demand, is we ask governments to act now to stop biodiversity loss and to get to net zero by 2025, which, by the way, is we're almost there. It's 2023 now, and when we get to 2025, I will still be saying it needs to be net zero by 2025, and that's because we don't go on what is politically possible, we go on what is necessary. And in order to reach net zero, and in order to stay below 1.5 with the Paris Agreement, we need to be net zero by 2025. And it's very clear to see that we won't be. But that is what's consistent for the UK particularly, and then also other advanced economies. Others might come later. But in order to respect 1.5, we need to be at net zero by 2025. And the last demand is a tricky one, because we're asking for another additional layer of democracy on top of our non-representative democracy, which is a form of direct democracy called the Citizens' Assembly. Extinction Rebellion is huge on Citizens' Assemblies, and there's a whole team who talk about that all day long. If you're interested in this thing, please do have a look. It works. It's direct democracy, and I can't go into detail here today, but it is basically giving power into the hands of people to guide politicians in their decisions, to give a mandate to these politicians to take those difficult decisions on our behalf that need to be taken. And there are great examples, both from recent and ancient history, of how these things work, and they do produce a good result. Last but not least, we have an immediate demand for this year, which is the end of all new fossil fuels. No more fossil fuel subsidies, no more fossil fuel extraction licenses, no more new fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to start to make that move away from the fossil fuel economy now. And if you look at that article, which I mentioned today, which talks about fossil fuel subsidies of over £1 trillion in the last year, that's more than twice the amount globally that we spent on renewables. Why is that? There's nothing that says we shouldn't be spending more on renewables. It is actually the cheaper source of energy now. And so what is the most important thing that you and I can do in this room? Well, it's to rebel. Everybody around the world now understands, or at least the majority of us, that there is a problem, and hopefully we are beginning to grasp the scale of that challenge. And we need to act now. If not now, then when? I mean, obviously, it would have been better to act 30 years ago, but the next best thing is for us to do so now. And if we don't act, who do we expect to act on our behalf? We are driving towards the cliff edge. We are arguably potentially over the cliff edge. We just haven't noticed it yet. We know that there's powerful vested interests in charge, and they're driving us in the wrong direction. There's a duty here. There's a moral imperative for us to take action, if not for ourselves, then for our children, and if not for them, then for our other loved ones. And if you're misanthropic and you hate people, you can still love a plant or an animal that is being endangered by everything that we're doing. It's just unfair. Traditional political engagement hasn't done enough. Leafleting and sending MPs friendly letters of please take action, please look after the planet for us, hasn't done anything. And rebellion is the only solution left as a tool to us. Does it work? Yes, it has worked in the past. Is it going to work on this occasion? We don't know. But I want to take you to just 2 slides on how it has worked in the past. And this is what we call at Exile the theory of change. And we join a great tradition of civil disobedience, otherwise called non-violent direct action, NVDA. There's a few key things that we need to know about NVDA, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But if you take some of the examples in history, in recent history, India's independence movement, or women's suffrage, the abolition movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement, the LGBTQI+ movement, and there's a couple of commonalities in all of these movements. And the first one is that they met with significant resistance from the government where they were taking action. There was a lot of violence potentially on behalf of the suppressing government, But these movements largely, with some exceptions, stayed nonviolent. And so they met with these resistance, but then there came a tipping point and they succeeded, although you might argue that the civil rights movements and some of the other things are half-finished stories, but we're talking about big waves of history here. And so we're looking at those tipping points where the change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And these people, women's suffrage or civil rights movement, if you think about these people, they were considered criminals in their time, and yet now they're heroes and nobody would dispute the right of women to vote. I hope nobody would dispute that people of all colors deserve the same level of rights and voting. And the same fate awaits the climate movement. We're just not there yet. But we need to know the components of how to build that nonviolent direct action campaign. Firstly, nonviolence. We know that the rules need to be broken if the rules are the wrong ones, but in a nonviolent way. Why is that? That's because science tells us, social science, that nonviolence is more effective and it has a much higher chance of success than violence. It is also morally right because we are not violent people, and I'm much more likely to join a movement where I don't need to pick up arms and start shooting at people. We're friendly, non-violent people. We don't want violence. But non-violence is great because it lowers the threshold of entry. And the people in this room might feel like, well, I can join that because we're just going to be non-violent in our actions. And there's also lots of evidence that a big, diverse mass movement is much more likely to succeed, just in terms of the amount of pressure that it can exert on a government. But also imagine the kinds of people joining. If all the skills that are required, there's 200 different roles in Extinction Rebellion, and so we need a diversity of all sorts of people, which helps us to work better together. And also people observing from outside might notice people that look like them and find it easier to either imagine joining, or at least to support the movement. Diversity and a big movement is crucial. At the same time, because it's called non-violent direct action, what's direct action part? It is disruption. We are creating publicity, we're stopping business as usual, we're pushing the regime towards change. It needs to be persistent. We're only 4 years old. Arguably, we've done quite a lot in that time. Are we 4.5 years old? I lose track. But non-violent direct actions have historically and does typically need to create disruption, which puts pressure on a government locally. My instinct is to obey the law because I'm a law-abiding citizen. But in order to get people's attention and get government's attention, it is necessary to be disruptive. Being compliant hasn't worked. And more recently, we've done what was called the Big One, which was the biggest rally we've had, with 200 different sister organizations in attendance, 100,000 people over the course of 4 days in front of Parliament, and our biggest march had like 60,000 people in it. What did that get us? Not a lot of anything, not a lot of publicity. It was very easy to ignore. And in fact, I like to quote the fact that the London Marathon was, our biggest march of 60,000 people was on a Saturday, and the London Marathon was on a Sunday, and it attracted 600,000 people. So 600,000 people turned up to watch people run. 60,000 people turned up to try and avoid global catastrophe. That tells you a bit about what non-disruptive stuff can do. In contrast, 4 people have been able to disrupt Southampton port so that they blocked oil tankers from landing on the shores of this country, which created a nationwide shortage in fuels for days. And that's disruptive. Does it make us popular? Not necessarily. But is it effective in raising awareness? Yes, it is. When Extinction Rebellion came about, the first and foremost, most important thing was to raise publicity so that the people are on side and understand the problem in sufficient numbers. And the next level now is to target centers of power and politicians and fossil fuel interests in general. We are making progress, although I'm an impatient person. I would say we're not making enough progress. Of course I am, because we haven't yet saved the world. But we know that there's a massive shift in public opinion in the UK. When Exile started, about 32% of people in the UK thought that there was a climate emergency. That number is now in the mid 80%. So that, public opinion has shifted significantly. Right after our April rebellion in 2019, the UK Parliament declared a climate emergency, as have since then 75% of all the local councils in the UK. So the discourse is changing. The actions aren't there yet. The foundations for action is for the conversation to change. And I think on the conversation front, we are slowly penetrating, and we're winning. We're also winning jury trials, and it's so much so that government has taken notice of our tactics, and they've changed the law to curb any seriously disruptive protest. They gave themselves the power to shut it down, and in fact, they have shut it down. Most recently, with Just Stop Oil slow marches, they've arrested people. Will this stop us? No. Will shooting the messenger make the message somehow go away? No. So this was the big one, just to flag up a little image here. And these are some of the people that joined us at the big one. It wasn't just climate organizations. There's a mix of different types of organizations on side. Groups hit by austerity, doctors, teachers, religious groups, all sorts of people. And I'd like to highlight in particular Love and Affection, anti-fracking nanas, which was my favorite group that joined us those 4 days. Those 4 days are done. What do we do next? We do 3 different things. We picket, we organize locally, and we continue to disobey. It seems that 100,000 people in front of Parliament got deeply ignored by the government and also by media, so we need to do something different. They've asked us to be non-disruptive. We've done that now. Didn't really work out. I'm not disappointed. I'm vindicated. I knew it wouldn't. So picket, we know that there's a cost of living crisis going on. There's protests and strikes and walkouts around the country, and we are standing with these people because a fight for cost of living and decent pay and working conditions, it's the same exact fight. It's a fight for justice. It's a different aspect. Another action which we do locally is, and this is potentially the most boring picture you'll ever see in a slide deck. However, it is actually critical that we engage with local politicians and council work. And I'm with the Southampton chapter of Extinction Rebellion. We have an airport near our house, Southampton Airport. They are looking to extend the runway so that they can send larger jets and more jets, leading to more local pollution, more noise, more CO2 emissions, and a few more jobs. And they're hell-bent on doing this. We know that we should be decommissioning airports, not commissioning more of them, and certainly not expanding them. And so we tried to delay and attack that expansion on all fronts possible, but the planning permission went ahead anyway. However, there is a copse of trees which would need to be removed to make that longer runway possible. And we're contesting the permission for that line of trees to be removed. And so we're protecting the trees and thereby delaying or stopping the expansion of the airport. It's all down to paying attention to local issues. And if every single town was engaged in this way, stopping locally polluting and increasing pollution, then we would be in a lot better place. We intend to keep doing that. We intend to grow into these communities and building local alliances and local politicians to work with us. And lastly, we have been disobeying since October of 2018. We sometimes feel a bit alone in doing so. I won't lie to you. But now we've seen that a lot of different organizations are now finding their voice and beginning to exercise their right to civil disobedience. So we want to help them. I think there's a lesson we can teach them, and we want to join them as well, because together we are stronger, and ultimately we do want the same thing. I want to finish on just a few quick points, but especially targeted at people who are thinking about joining Extinction Rebellion. I want you to know that Extinction Rebellion, whilst it's big, it is nowhere near big enough. And we need you. We need you to join. And the fact that you're here today means that you're potentially interested in doing so. Do it now. Do it for your children. Do it for your grandchildren. We need you to go beyond just lifestyle changes, beyond recycling. We need you to get politically active and join Exile, or join any other movement for that matter. Don't wait for the next day. For climate is basically one big bloody deadline, and every day matters. And if you join, why should you do that? Because there is a lot of benefits to doing so for yourself as well as for the planet around you. It is morally the right thing to do. It is the right time as well, but you can discover that there's agency in here. And the point about hope that I mentioned early on in the talk, that this is what gives me hope: agency, the feeling that I am actually doing something, and everybody can do something. Maybe I do these talks, somebody else does something else, and there are definitely roles in Extinction Rebellion for everybody. And also, there's a place for everybody, and we need every part and every bit of everyone. Whatever type of interest group you belong to, you'll find like-minded people in Exile. It's a very diverse group of individuals. If you're a Buddhist, you'll find it here. If you're a cyclist, you'll find it here. If you're a plumber, you'll find it here. And roles, we need so many different things done. Whatever your skills and your interests, there will be a role for you. You can put your hand up, and Lisa will be mentioning how you can do that. But there are hundreds of things that you can do to grow and nurture the movement and continue to make it resilient as it needs to be. We need to persist, and we're here to stay until the job is done. I'd like to warn you against that sentiment into the future. Do not look back and regret that you've missed an opportunity to make a difference before it was too late. I'm going to stop us there with a couple of final thoughts, reiterating, I think, the key points that were made today. Number one, if you've made your personal lifestyle changes and your personal commitments, do not believe that you can sit back and relax. Forcing government action is necessary. And it's great to have the personal lifestyle changes, and they model the future in which we want to all live, but by themselves, they'll not be sufficient. And number two, do not believe that Extinction Rebellion have got your back, that you can sit back and relax because we're acting on your behalf. We haven't got your back. We need more people, a lot more people. We need you, your planet needs you, and life itself needs you. Those are my parting thoughts. This is a QR code which you can click on. You can take a picture of the screen here. Lisa will also be distributing these links. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for persisting with me today. And I hand the floor back to you and the chat. Thank you.